Jim, you and Janet ready? You guys good? All right. Steve's here. All right. Do they have my?
Patrick is who wrote this. Schofield wrote it. Is that what he's saying?
Good. Welcome, everyone, to our Town Council work session for October 4th, 2022 at 6:02 p.m. We're going to call to order our work session to review a new short-term rental ordinance. So just a reminder for tonight, we're not going to be taking any votes this evening. It's just a discussion and a review on a proposed ordinance. We will go to the public towards the end of the work session, time permitting, to take public comment as well, as we always do. We're going to try to keep this to about 2 hours this evening. I do want to give a little background on how we got to this point. So quite a while back, this term, maybe about between 9 and 12 months ago, there was an agenda item on one of our council meetings to direct town staff to work on a short-term rental ordinance. That item was put on by, I believe, Councilor Drzezinski and Murray. That was approved, and that directive went to the town manager. In between then and now, we formed a working group at the town level, which consisted of 2 council members, Councilor Drzezinski and Councilor Deb Kopek, along with our building inspector, Wayne Pimentel, our community development director, Mike DeLuca, town manager, our town solicitor, James Callahan, and they've sort of worked through this process to put together something for us to review. So that's what we're doing tonight. Again, it was the work of that group, not the full council, so we're all here to kind of talk about it transparently in the open and see where we land and see if we do move forward in the future with something. But tonight, it's just a discussion. What I want to do is hand it over to both counselors who were involved in the initial stages of this draft ordinance. We'll take, we will direct questions to our staff, have an open discussion, then we'll go to the public. So why don't I hand it over to either Councilor Drzezinski or Kopek, whoever wants to start.
Yep, I'll start. So good evening, everyone. So this has been a long time in the making. We referred it to the town manager a while back, earlier in this council session, and we're coming on the 2-year mark of our term. And it has been a top issue that's been expressed by a lot of residents. So it's just kind of bringing the balance of, you know, the residents versus property owners and rights. So what we did was we researched a lot of the ordinances locally, nationally. There's a lot of ordinances out there, and there's a lot of municipalities in various states across the U.S. That do have short-term rental ordinances. And we looked at those. We kind of came up with some of the language. None of this language is new. We didn't make up any of this language. It's been adopted from various ordinances, and when you really look, even locally, and I would actually suggest and recommend that anyone that's interested in how ours compares to some of the local ordinances to really just look. And you can Google it. For example, today I was working at Westerly Hospital, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they have a short-term rental ordinance, which I had come across it before too. So they do have ordinances, and a lot of, theirs is 28 days. When we look at surrounding areas like Newport, I'm sure everyone's heard that they have a 30-day minimum. Jamestown as well. When you look at other coastal communities, a lot of them are taking action just to kind of get their community back. And this isn't punitive in any way to property owners. It's just, again, having that balance and having some kind of, control or just oversight, with transient occupants, people coming in and out of neighborhoods, people don't feel safe, and a lot of these aren't registered. And there is a law that passed earlier through the state legislature through Rhode Island, where it's mandatory for short-term rental occupied ordinances who host on websites like Airbnb to register with the Department of Business Regulations with the state. And there are actually fines associated if that's not done. So if any property owners are out there, I would suggest that you review that as well. So again, this is a work session. We're here to hear everyone's opinions, and we will have public comment. There was a lot of work that went into it, and I do thank our subcommittee. Thank you to Wayne, Kevin Tuttle, and Deb and Mike DeLuca. And it's never an easy thing writing ordinances or trying to implement something new, because there's going to be there's two sides to every story. There's two sides to every position or so there's obviously the property owners and there's the residents, and we're just trying to come up with something that works for everybody, and just kind of listen to everybody and come up with some language for the ordinance. Again, this is the draft ordinance, and we did go over it in a lot of detail. So those are my comments for now. We will have our staff answer any questions. And I know there were some concerns about the fee structure for violations. However, that is pretty much in line with a lot of the ordinances that are out there. In fact, there's ordinances in other municipalities that are really, really, I would say, kind of the higher end. So, fines, I'll just give some examples just so that, you're aware of where these fines came from. And again, it's $500 is typical, but in New York, the fines range from $1,000 to $7,500. San Francisco, $500 a day. Washington, D.C., $500 to $6,000 per violation. Chicago is $1,500 to $3,000 per day.
No, you can't. You'll have a chance to speak
No,
at the
I'm
end.
I'm just going over the fee things. You can speak later. But I'm just saying, because that was one of the things that we did get emails. I did read the emails. I read most of them. I will read them tonight. But I'm just saying that, again, we didn't make these fee structures up. They came from ordinances that we looked into. Also, the National League of Cities is a resource that was considered or actually looked at, and that's short-term rental regulations, and it's a guide for local government. So we did have, articles and a lot that went into this, and Mike DeLuca did provide a lot of background on it, and he also did a lot of research on the ordinances that are implemented all over the country. So with that, I will let my colleague Deb speak and give her comments.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Is that a yes or no? Okay. Sorry, I have an incredibly low register voice. I'll just put this right up to my mouth here. Is yours louder? Is this louder? Oh, it is. I got the crappy microphone. You can go back. Oh, okay, thank you. Is it better? Is this better? Thank you. Good evening. I have a slightly different approach to this. I'm notorious for giving history lessons, so I'm going to start with that. I'd like to address first the issue of what a short-term rental is or could be in Narragansett, because we currently have no definition of the term in our ordinance structure. The issue of the one definition of short-term rentals is not new to Narragansett. In fact, there's a lengthy history of seasonal rentals, especially in the south end of our town and in Bonnet Shores. I can attest to that because as a child over 60 years ago, my family left our home in Cranston and rented a cottage at Scarborough for a week, and continued to do so for a lot of my childhood in various locations when we could afford it. I also lived outside of Rhode Island as an adult and rented cottages almost every year to see my extended family and illustrate the beauty of the coast to my landlocked children. From the 1950s up until the 2000s, the early 2000s, a short-term seasonal house rental in Narragansett was weekly or 2 weeks, possibly a month, and for the lucky few, an entire summer. For visitors who wanted a shorter rental, there were bed and breakfast locations, a few motels, and some inns. I'd like to point out also that those rentals were in houses that were built for summer excursions, generally lacked heat, and were located in a town that had significantly fewer year-round residents and virtually no residential developments, a very different community than today. I've been studying the incredible change in the nature of very short-term rentals, that is fewer than 7 days across the country, generally in areas frequented by tourists and travelers. Most short-term online companies that work with landlords and renters have been in existence for fewer than 30 years. In Narragansett, rentals of fewer than 7 days did not become prevalent until about 10 to 12 years ago. And make no mistake, Narragansett is not unique. Up and down, as Eva pointed out, up and down the coast, out west, around national parks, in California, communities are facing and addressing the problem of commercial property rentals, particularly in the midst of residential communities and neighborhoods. Some have restrictions that require property owners to be on the premises. Others have restrictions and fees not dissimilar to what is suggested in this draft. As I noted above, the concern about unregulated short-term rentals is widespread. The use of residential property as a commercial venture, much like a hotel or inn, has grown incredibly over the past 30 years as an outgrowth of the ability to create and reach vast numbers using the internet. Prior to the 1990s, the vacation rental business was largely managed by telephone, travel agencies, and in-person visits that limited the scope of vacation rentals. I want to state my thoughts on this issue clearly. I do not agree and have not agreed with the short-term rental proposal starting with 30 days because of my respect for the history of this town, my own personal experience, and because I do not hear concerns from residents about weekly summer rentals, and that is not what is contained in this document. I just want to note that the short-term rental definition in this document says shall mean the rental of a dwelling unit or a portion thereof or habitable accessory structure associated with a dwelling by the owner to another person or group of persons for occupancy, dwelling, lodging, or sleeping purposes for a period of no less than 7 days and no more than 30 consecutive calendar days. And we got a lot of mail from folks concerned about shorter term than 30 days, so I wanted to clarify that in case you hadn't had an opportunity to actually read this. So, and I do support a 7-day or greater seasonal rental policy with regard to short-term rentals. In the first meeting that I attended with Councilwoman Drzezinski and town management, we did discuss having different requirements for the 10 or so weeks in the summer when the vast majority of visitors are in town and for the period from mid-September through mid-May. That's not in this draft, and that's one of the reasons why we call it a draft, because we are open to thoughts and ideas and possibly making changes. At any rate, I received correspondence that asks that instead of changing anything, that we simply engage in enforcement. There's nothing simple about the enforcement when we have weak or non-existent ordinances or laws to be enforced. I believe we need to address the issue of a lack of a good definition of short-term rentals, and once we have that, we can continue to determine the appropriate enforcement. But enforcement is not cheap, and costs should not be borne by taxpayers. I'm willing to listen to alternative ways to pay for enforcement, but the cost should be borne by the property owners whose businesses are disruptive to their residential neighbors. I do understand and absolutely appreciate those property owners who take great care in determining who will rent their facilities, provide detailed information about what can and cannot occur on their premises, and follow up to ensure that their rules are enforced. So thank you. Like so many other issues that this council has had to deal with in the past 2 years, the issue of short-term rentals entered the Narragansett community with no forethought on anybody's part, not on our part, no one's part, about how to manage the conflicting requirements. Some emails I have received state that this council is trying to regulate everything. I see it differently. What I believe we have tried to do is to create structure and rules by which the entire community can live with some level of compromise. When people talk about property rights, my thoughts go to the fact that the problem is about infringing on one another's rights. We have ordinances that are sometimes very difficult to enforce with regard to traffic, noise, garbage, sewage, and a host of other things. But if people do not play by these rules, enforcement can become very expensive, and it already is for the residents and taxpayers of this town. So enforcement is one piece of the solution. Playing by the rules, that is, accepting and following our ordinance on the part of property owners, is another part of the solution. Having clear, concise requirements within ordinances is a third part, and determining through discussion and compromise what those ordinances should state is the point of this workshop. I've also received correspondence asking why anything needs to be done, and these folks blame a small minority of loud residents for the issue being raised at all. My experience has not been that. I have heard from residents throughout the town, permanent residents who are concerned about disruption, not just noise, as some would have you believe. There are a host of issues from excessive traffic on neighborhood streets, use of property for parking that is not part of the rented property, inappropriately bagged garbage, and overuse of our infrastructure, as well as noise. But the crux of the matter is that something needs to be done because very short-term rentals have taken all areas in this town by storm, and our local laws were not modified to account for them. To those who complain that this council, just created limiting laws, the fact is that each issue that we have addressed possibly could have been addressed previously, and in some cases attempts were made, but we chose to look at these issues. We're elected on promises that we would do our best to work out various issues, and that is what we have tried to do. Some important points include, although it is difficult to pinpoint the number of short-term rentals in Narragansett, especially without a clear definition of what a short-term rental is, the estimate is that there are over 1,000 properties currently used for short-term rentals. Also hard to quantify are the number of landlords whose properties are unregistered, which makes enforcement difficult and time-consuming, although ultimately not impossible. There are properties with bedrooms built after the fact that are not up to standard code and need to be either modified to meet the code or no longer used as bedrooms. So there's a lot of parts to this. I'd like to make the point that this workshop is just that. I know that there are individuals who believe that because something is committed to paper that the fix is in, and nothing will be done if the council has the votes. And I'd like to dispel that. For it is, first of all, we don't talk about this in terms of the five of us without being in public because that's illegal. I've been working on this issue for several weeks now, and I've only been in contact regarding this document with Eva and town management. The town manager does not set the agenda for the town council alone, and would also not know who would be voting for what. Speaking for myself, I do listen to people who come before us and have changed my mind or modified my position, often based on new information that I did not have initially. I've worked in corporate and municipal organizations, and whenever a draft document is proposed to me or written by me, the intention is to discuss the contents and change, modify, add, or remove sections after discussing them, and that's why we're here tonight. Sometimes the modifications happen even after an ordinance has passed. A perfect example of that was the passage of modifications to the 14-month-old bulk zoning ordinance just last night. All of the town council members have received large numbers of emails from constituents and property owners over the past several days. Some include interesting and useful ideas about what might be done in place of what we have so far, and I hope we can incorporate these ideas. But the purpose of this work session was to work on the language of the ordinance, and explain it to everyone, and that's what I'm here to do. Thank you for coming, and I apologize to the folks from Narragansett who are Jewish and cannot make this because of Yom Kippur.
All right, thank you, Deb. Susan or Patrick, anything now, or you want to wait till later to speak?
So, good evening, everybody. Happy to be here tonight. I received the draft on Friday, so tonight's conversation and discussion is going to be new to me. I've looked it over. There are a lot of things that I think could be modified on this, and when I think about a workshop, I usually like the voices to come together, kind of generate your ideas, and then draft it. So I do think the process is a little flawed in the sense that it would have been helpful to have open dialogue before a draft is in front of us, because now I think there's a opportunity where people feel like they have to sort of try to negotiate things in and out. So I'm not really fond of that kind of process. I think it would have been important had we come together and just identified how many short-term rentals there are there problems? I mean, I'm all over the town. I haven't heard huge problems. People don't come up every day and say, oh my God, there's this problem with these short-term rentals. Today I asked for the data, and we got some data, and that was the first time I saw a baseline of how many rentals, how many Airbnbs, how many people are doing it. So I think we're starting at ground zero, and I hope that tonight we have good dialogue from the public, I want to say both sides, because I'm not taking a side. I want what's best for Narragansett. That includes the residents, and that includes the landlords. But I don't want to rush this. We have 2 meetings left, and I don't want to rush to approve an ordinance with this council just because it's timely or because there's a commitment to it. We want to get it right. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear what it doesn't look good to you and how we can make it better to work for the entire town of Narragansett. So I look forward to hearing from everybody tonight and their open, honest opinion about some of the things. And I really think that it's pretty lengthy, so to understand it for the public and the council, we should really walk through it in a pretty clear, explicit way so we all know what it means to the town of Narragansett.
Thanks, Susan. Patrick, or you want to go to our building inspector? Okay.
Good evening. I'm not happy to be here. Yeah, short-term rentals, initially, my goal was to target the 5, 6 bedroom, 8 bedroom, 10 bedroom that are switching out, 10, 15 people per night, times 2 every night during the summer. But I know that doesn't happen. I know a lot of short-term rentals are fill-in for weeks that don't get rented. And, but I think the higher-end, more bedroom dwellings should be limited to, because it's not owner-occupied. And then owner-occupied dwellings, I mean, how does that affect the homeowner? Under our charter, you can have up to 2 boarders and board them as you see fit. So we're going to have a breakdown line by line, or what's going on? Okay, all right. All right, well, let's go ahead and get this show on the road. But
Okay.
I think this is an encroachment of property rights, but also, I think large daily rentals of larger bedroom houses is also an encroachment on neighbors' property rights. I think there's a happy medium somewhere, and hopefully we can resolve this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, why don't we have our building inspector come up and go through some of this text, what's noteworthy in here, what will affect property owners in reality, and get all of us to have a kind of a better understanding of what we're discussing tonight. So Wayne, if you don't mind coming up, and Mike, if you could put this up on the screen, we'd appreciate it. So Wayne, thank you for the work that you've done with the group. Thank you, Wayne. And if you're able to give us a general overview as well as the regulations that are noteworthy within this text, that would be helpful.
Sure. I think everybody had good statements that they made relative to the intent of this ordinance, and I look forward to hearing some feedback from the residents as well. We put this together based on other ordinances and what we felt as though the town needed for short-term rental compliance. We do have the current rental registration in effect. This would be in addition to that. This would be based on a per bedroom of the units. Basically, what we would be looking for is quantifying whether the bedrooms are legal or not. We have a lot of residents in this town where bedrooms are not legal, basically either for egress or parking. So this ordinance would address that. We would initially inspect those dwellings to make sure that they're in compliance with that. A lot of the complaints that we've gotten was that there are too many people at some of these dwellings and there's not sufficient parking. There's also references to the noise ordinance, which is currently on the books anyway, regardless if it's a short-term or a long-term rental. It would follow the same renewal date that the current registration format takes. We would require that emergency contacts are provided for basically agents that would live less than 30 miles from the dwelling if the owners are out of state, so that if we do have to contact them for a complaint, we would be able to contact them directly. I'll quickly go over some of the violations that would be, we would be enforcing should this get passed. And again, this
Wayne,
is,
can I just ask you something?
Yes.
Before you go over the violations, can you go over the actual ordinance, some of the things that are required, like how long it would be and all that, this first page, or do you want to go right into violations? Just for the public to hear specifically what the ordinance pertains to, 18 or older, 7 days, or to 30, just the basic concept of the ordinance before we do violations?
sure. I'll go over some of the basic definitions that are addressed in the
thank you.
ordinance. Adult meaning anyone 18 years of age or older. The building official is myself or someone in my capacity in the building department. We do have an unrelated persons ordinance, which would also be enforced under this ordinance. And that basically is a maximum of no more than 4 unrelated persons living together. The local representative or agent would be someone that would represent the owner if they're out of state, that would be available on 24/7 basis to respond to complaints. The agent must be located less than 30 miles from the dwelling. The owner would just be the entity holding legal or equitable title to the short-term rental. Excuse me, as discussed earlier, the short-term rental is an occupancy for not less than 7 days and not more than 30 consecutive days. Items that would be not included would be approved hotels, motels, and rooming houses would not constitute a short-term rental. And a structure means any man-made object having an ascertainable stationary location at any given time on land or water. There are some exemptions that would not constitute a short-term rental, such as tents, recreational vehicles, boats, sheds, garages, campers, or similar types of structures or recreational equipment. I know today there are a lot of creative ways to rent pretty much anything. So those would not constitute a short-term rental nor be allowed. The registration would be required. There would be a schedule of fees based upon it per bedroom. We would require liability insurance that the owner would have to produce. It would be on a yearly basis. The renewal would follow the same as the regular rental registration from September 1st to August 31st. Parking would have to be, they'd have to provide sufficient parking on the site for the number of bedrooms that they have. They would need 1 parking space for every bedroom. There would be a limit of 2 persons per bedroom in the short-term rental ordinance. There would not be allowed any off-street parking or on-street parking, I should say, for the use of the short-term rental. Again, that's one of the things that was asked to be addressed was, you get a property where there's 10 cars that show up and they park all over the street, impacting the neighborhood and, emergency vehicles and so forth. So all parking must be provided on site for the short-term rental dwelling.
Right.
The short-term rental could not be used for commercial uses, private events, parties, or subleased. Some of the issues that have been brought to our attention would be bachelor type parties where you get a large group of persons renting for a couple of nights. So something like that we were trying to eliminate by prohibiting those type of uses. The lease agreements would need to be, excuse me, provided similar to those that are provided for current rental registrations. They would be provided on-site and available to police, fire, or building if necessary. That's pretty much as far as the general regulations go. I'll get into a little bit of the administration and enforcement of the ordinance. Basically, we would be enforcing this based upon complaint basis. So if the police get a complaint regarding any infraction of the ordinance, we would contact the owner or the owner's rep, informing them of the infraction if it's not a police matter, such as if it's, parking too many cars out on the street, or having too many people in the dwelling. I'll just go right into some of the violations that we would cite. So the occupancy limit would be 2 persons per bedroom. So when we do issue any type of registration, if it's for a 3-bedroom home, no more than 6 persons could reside at that dwelling under the short-term rental ordinance. Anything more than that would be enforceable. Failure to resolve a noise complaint if received by the police within 30 minutes of that complaint. The owner or the local representative, response time exceeding 60 minutes after receiving a complaint. Rental of the property for less than 7 days. And I know we had talked about utilizing a third-party company to basically search alternate sites such as Vrbo or Airbnb, and they would basically chart these rentals and give us a list of all of those that would possibly be an infraction of renting for less than 7 days, which we would investigate and cite if need be. Excuse me. The parking of vehicles out on the street, probably not the easiest thing to enforce, but that is one of the infractions. More than one noise complaint lodged with the police during any one separate occupancy. So if the police have to respond, more than twice within, a period of rental for a week or between a week and 30 days, that would be an infraction. Any type of criminal activity on the short-term rental would be another one. Failure to register the rental property if it's being used as a short-term would be another. We have, again, the fines, we're starting off at $500 per day for each offense. That's in line with our current municipal ordinance fines. It would go up to $1,000 per day for a second offense. And then the third offense, the registration for the short-term rental would be revoked. So it would not be able to be used for a short-term rental. There would be the regular registration fee that's set up for rentals, which is $120 per year. The current late fee is $300 if it's late. And the short-term registration fee would be $75 per bedroom. So those are basically all the fees and the potential offenses associated with the short-term rental. So I know there'll be questions, but that's kind of a recap of the ordinance in general.
All right, thank you, Wayne.
Any particular questions right now?
Yeah, anyone who has questions for Wayne, go ahead. Patrick?
So what about owner-occupied buildings who have more than 6?
So that's still, we wouldn't touch that. So there is a provision, if there's an owner-occupied dwelling, you can have up to 2 boarders without any licenses. Anything over that would require a license from the town clerk's office.
But they would still have to rent 7 days?
Um,
Or they can rent less than 7 days?
I'm not sure. I mean, that's handled as a boarding house under the town clerk's office and licensed separately. So I'm not
Bed and
sure.
breakfast, they have to rent 7 days? No, that's separate. It's exempt. That's exempt. Okay, so.
Yeah, we wouldn't, those wouldn't be, those aren't proposed to be included in this ordinance.
Right, so when an individual has 2 extra bedrooms and they want to rent them out at will, that would be exempt?
That's the impression. We did not address that in this ordinance.
All right, before and later, run that by me again. You have a 6-bedroom house, you can have, say you have 6 people, and only,
There's a
you
lot
have to have 4 of them that are related?
of, well, you can't have more than 4 that are unrelated.
You have more than 4 that are related. So, who's the gatekeeper of that?
That's a good question. I mean,
Is that another line on the registration form? Relationships.
yeah, I mean, proving whether and how somebody is related is going to be difficult at best.
How do you determine things? I mean, would it be like a stepbrother be related? Or a third cousin by my mother's uncle? I mean,
It's possible. You know, we're all related at some point, so I don't know. I don't have the answer to that at this point.
I don't know. I just woke up. I think I'm adopted here in this town. Geez.
Patrick, can I ask a question about the short-term rental
Sure.
days? I just wanted to, it has a week and then it goes to 30 days. We're not talking about Airbnbs, we're talking about just short-term rentals.
Well, basically, this would prohibit anything under 7 days.
Right, so like for somebody like me, and not really, I didn't work on it, I'm thinking 3 to 5 days sounds like a good short-term rental. We got a week, we got 30 days. So is it, right now, is it, they can't rent for less than a week? Is that in this ordinance?
Yes, that's correct.
So it would be
Prohibited.
anybody that's trying to rent in the town of Narragansett that has a short-term rental, it has to be a week.
That's correct. Would be a week minimum.
And do we know where all those rentals are, or no? I mean, I'm just trying to get a baseline understanding of an ordinance that we're going to try to pass, but are there 100 of them, 200 of them, 500?
Well, we ran the numbers on the number of rentals. Right now, when
I have
they
some of
submit a rental application, and we don't have all of them, excuse me, in place yet, but right now we have 1,418 that have been submitted online. 78 of those are summer only. 66 have identified as short-term, less than 30 days. And I would say the rest are either year-round rentals or the majority would be college rental, academic and summer combined. So they all have the, with the exception of the year-round rentals, all would have the potential of having short-term rentals, especially during the summer.
But just to clarify, those are just the registered ones. There's many out there that are not registered. And I know that sometimes I'll see, even in my neighborhood, different cars all the time, and they're not registered to, be a rental. So
Wayne,
that's kind of the issue that we have as well.
Those Granicus numbers have it at over 1,000, correct? Is that the numbers that we have from Granicus estimate?
I can't remember if Mike knows what those numbers were, but we would
Yes.
utilize
Okay, thank you.
Granicus to look into all type of rental platforms to give us a report on where they are, what they're renting. So if it doesn't align, if it doesn't align with our rental registration and they're renting, then those would certainly be some that we would investigate.
Can we explain what Granicus is?
Yeah, Granicus is it's a third-party company that takes data from online sites that do short-term rentals, and they track them by city, by town, by state, and they can provide reports to cities and towns indicating the amount of rentals, short-term rentals, the amount of days that these rentals are occurring, how many people are renting from at each interval, and they provide reports to the cities and towns I know Newport uses them for their enforcement of their short-term rental ordinance, as well as a number of communities around the country. So it's not unusual to ask a company like that, because they are basically looking at all of those, including, rentals that the owners use through these various platforms. So that information would be very helpful for somebody like us if we do have to do any type of enforcement for those that don't properly register.
Any other questions for Wayne right now?
Wayne, could you just, I know you were in contact with, I believe you said you were talking to Newport and some other municipalities that have these ordinances. Is that correct? Or Kevin was?
Yeah, Kevin, I
Yeah,
know,
Kevin
had
did, yeah.
spoken with the fire marshal in Newport relative to their ordinances, and
In terms of it's, like, if it's being enforced, like successful or successfully enforced, or was it more in terms of just how they were doing it? I guess, is Kevin here?
Kevin is here.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah,
I'll let him.
sorry, Kevin. I didn't. Hi, Kevin, sorry. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I've been talking to the Newport Fire Marshal about their new, I believe it's a guest house license. That's only in commercial areas, but their city's set up very differently than ours, and they had about 500 come in for approval. And then as far as the host compliance or Granicus component of it, they are very happy with the product that they're providing. They provide them weekly reports that tell them who's in compliance with their ordinance, who's out of compliance, and then what aspects of the ordinance they're not complying with. So the host compliance part of it, Granicus is the company, they're very happy with the service that they're providing.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
I got some more questions.
Go ahead. For Wayne specifically?
Yeah,
Okay.
the parking issue. So you need 200 feet per bedroom.
Yes, 200 square feet per bedroom.
Right. So what if you got 6 people there, and somebody comes and visits and parks out front? And they're not staying there.
Well, that would,
they're just
that
guests.
would, that would have to be part of the rental that, when they're renting, or the owners or property manager that are renting these properties, to say, listen, we only have 3 or 4 parking spaces on site. There's 3 guests there, we only can have 1 guest. I mean,
Welcome to Narragansett.
that's up for discussion. I mean, the problem is, you get these.
How is this, any of this, how is this enforceable? To where somebody comes and visits their cousin renting
Yeah.
a house in Narragansett for the half a day or whatever.
Right.
And then they park out front.
I think,
Can't stay because you can't park.
I think those type of situations, I don't think we're gonna get a complaint on something like that. It's when you have the ones where they have the larger parties. They have a bachelorette party and there's 20 cars out in the street and they're having a good old time. Those are the ones that I think we'll get the complaints on.
Right.
Something like, a summer rental where you get, people visiting, that happens all the time. I don't think the neighbors are gonna call on them and,
But it's in here, right? I mean, it's an issue. The parking's an issue.
It is, but I know I've actually rented Airbnb in other municipalities, and it does, like, it'll give you a limit, like you can only park 1 car, because there are, the way the ordinances are written, wherever the town that you rent in, and it will say that. So if you're renting a house with friends, then you carpool, or you just adhere to those rules. So that's kind of, that ahead of time before you rent a house.
I actually,
What-
I'm sorry, can I say?
What other towns did you get information from?
we got
Like,
the information
a
from
Gulag or something?
Newport, Portsmouth, and then a variety of different sites throughout the country.
Right.
I know, Ever and Mike both helped with getting information from others that we felt were applicable to the town, and that's where, it was put together to form this ordinance.
Because, there's some towns that, are more restrictive in policing and cameras. I mean, I don't even want a parking meter in this town. I don't want a camera. Now you got a third-party company looking up homeowners in Narragansett. I mean, good God, where does it stop? I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
chewing on you,
Yeah.
but this is the ordinance that they're proposing, and to me, it's just an encroachment. And I understand I totally agree on these large bedroom houses, in and out, transferring, 15, 20, 25 people a night. There's a crew coming in, a crew coming out every night, and then that's a problem. Or they do these venues where they sublease the property and, and it's a mess. But isn't that like a local policing ordinance instead of encroaching on everybody's?
I don't know, I mean,
There's got to be a line, a demarcation that's somewhere in the middle. I think this is a vast overreach that is, again, going to cause, it's going to turn, you're not going to be a building inspector anymore. You're going to be a clerical worker. You're going to be too busy to inspect the building because you'll be at the computer.
I don't know.
You're going to have to hire a whole team of people.
All right, so Deb, you wanted to
I don't
speak,
always
right?
agree with you, Patrick, but I do this time.
I just wanted to say that as far as the parking issue is concerned, I have a concern about partly what Patrick is talking about. People do come down here, they spend a week here. They might have family come down because they live someplace else and they're, coming for whatever. It could be, a birthday party or whatever. Not a giant party, not a tent party, just a party. And I think we need to address that issue, or maybe possibly somehow in here, because I mean, people have the right to have a good time. They have a right to enjoy themselves on vacation. But I also believe that there's limitations. So those cars go away, and they don't spend the night, and they aren't, crowding people out particularly. So I think we need to just look at that a little bit and maybe fine-tune
Absolutely.
the issue. That's
and
all.
that's why, again, listening to everybody here to hear what they have to say.
Right.
I was tasked with putting together an ordinance based
Right.
upon input.
Yep.
And it's a starting point, and I look forward to hearing
To working on it,
everybody's
right.
viewpoint on this and other suggestions as well.
I think I think your use of the phrase "starting point" is a good one, because that's exactly what we're doing. And I think that, I know I'm open to listen to what people have to say and to modify, accordingly. At the same time, there are going to be all different opinions here tonight, so we have to take them all into consideration and come back and possibly do this again.
Yep.
and have another meeting with a revised version. So.
All
Excellent.
right. Absolutely.
Thanks, Wayne.
All
Thank you,
set.
Wayne.
You're welcome.
All right. So where are we at time-wise? 45 minutes in. So I guess I'll speak on this as well. Again, I want to, definitely thank the group for their work putting this together. But I think it's important to think about, what is the purpose of the workshop tonight? Like, what are we trying to achieve with the ordinance? Are we trying to manage the amount of rentals that we have and regulate the behavior of those rentals? Because I don't think that this ordinance is going to decrease the overall amount of rentals. It may actually possibly increase the amount because some of the restrictions, it may cause additional purchases. And what's the goal? What is the goal? This is the same discussion that we've had when we talked about college rentals. And you have one group of people saying, this is all about the partying and the behavior, we need to stop that. And you have another group, this group that I would say I'm in, that says the problem is that too many properties are getting bought up to be either college rentals or short-term rentals. And what it does is it just decreases the amount of year-round available housing in town to the point where it doesn't even matter if there's parties anymore, because there's going to be no one living here to complain about it, because it'll be all short-term rentals. So again, what's the goal? I think the goal should be not to try to put all of these restrictions in place, because I don't think it's going to get us in a better place, even though I appreciate the work that's been done. Nothing's been done in town in the last 20 years to help this situation, and it's only got worse. And we're having this meeting because we're in the same situation as Newport and Middletown and Jamestown and San Diego and Atlanta, and all these other places that have put restrictions in place because it has to happen. Because you can't have hotels in neighborhoods unfettered. You know, like, these are boutique hotels in residential zones. That's what it is. And it's not a property right to be able to do that. That's why we have hotel licenses and we have bed and breakfast licenses, because that's the zoning. Airbnb has its name because the idea was that you would have an air mattress in your room because you were renting out a spare room in your house. That was the beginning of the platform. And that's not what it is now. Now it's a platform to rent out your boutique hotel, your 8-bedroom house in Narragansett. That's a business. So that's why we get the flood of emails. That's why we have 75% of the audience here tonight in attendance, because it's your business that we're affecting. We know what's going on. I mean, this is about the money. So what do we do to make it better for the people that live here year-round, and in some way make it fair for people that have invested their money? I don't know if there is a way to make it perfectly fair, but I understand that Narragansett's always been a seasonal rental town. It has been as long as Susan's lived here and Patrick. When I moved here in 1990, tons of summer rentals. I know a person who has probably 300 rentals in town. I think we all know. But that has been the case. What has changed is the way that the properties have been managed and the way they've been booked because of online platforms. It's much easier, more people are doing it, there's more capital going into it, it's easier to book it. That's the change. So do we try to work around the edges, you know, with different regulation to try to get to a goal, or do we just say, this is our goal? Our goal is to have a certain amount of rentals in town that we think is acceptable, is healthy. What's the healthy number? So instead of all of this, you know, I would just say, let's figure out what the healthy number of short-term rentals in town is. Set that number. If you are doing that now, if you have, and I know, you know, some people are going to hate this. Some people say this is okay. If you have a short-term rental now, you're grandfathered in. I know that there's groups that are going to think that's terrible. You continue doing it as if you sell that house, that's no longer a short-term rental. There's a cap. If you want to make your house a short-term rental, get on the waiting list. When a spot opens up, you could do that. But if you're going to buy your house because you want to make it a Airbnb or a short-term rental, you're going to have to wait. And if you don't have the money to pay that mortgage in the meantime, then don't risk the investment. Because right now there is no risk. If you buy something in Narragansett, there's no risk. You can always rent it. You can rent it to college kids. You can rent it in the summer. There's no way you can lose money. But if you don't have that ability right off the bat, then that's going to open up a lot of inventory for people that would like to live here year-round. So I think we just say, this is what we think is reasonable. That's the cap. If you're renting now, you can continue to do that. If someone wants to buy your house, they're not buying an Airbnb, they're buying a house. Because that's the difference, is that when you rent for 30 days on a lease, you're providing a home to someone. When you rent for 3 days or 7 days, it's a hotel. You're running a business. That's the difference between yearly rentals and short-term rentals. So that's where I stand on this. Sorry, Eva, I know it isn't really, in line with the list of restrictions, but I think that it's a simpler way to achieve what we want, and I think that we're going to see a lot of towns and cities doing this because it's just not sustainable for a community to allow businesses to buy up such large quantities of houses in neighborhoods, especially in neighborhoods that didn't used to have this. It was always in the South End, but it wasn't happening in Mattatuxet, at Pennaquamskin, and Edgewater. You didn't have their short-term rentals there. So if anyone says it's always been the case, it has not been the case in these neighborhoods. So that's it for now. Yep.
Yeah, I got a question. What happens if say a guy's been living in his house with his family for 30 years, the kids are gone, and they want to turn that into a short-term rental. They have to get on the list,
Sure.
even though they've been here for 30 years?
They haven't been renting it. What I'm saying is that I think it is fair to allow people to continue to rent if they've done it. And as soon as they sell it, that's not a rental anymore. Unless the cap isn't full. If we say 800 homes can be short-term rentals and that's not full, there's only 700 at the time, then if someone buys a new house, go ahead, rent it.
So the
We're gonna
cap,
need a bigger town hall.
Whatever the cap, I mean, I don't know that number. We'd have to
the
probably
cap
have a.
number is based on who, the current people doing this. right?
I'm not sure, that, I don't know. I'm sure there are companies that could do a study and say this is a good balance for a town. You
Well,
want
there
the,
are several communities that do that have a
Right.
cap.
yeah.
Which is, it's an interesting idea, but we need to do a lot of.
I don't know the
research to figure out
number,
would
right.
be. Okay.
What I'm saying is that if that's what we're trying to do anyway, is to get to a number that we think is healthy, then just set the number.
Jesse, so I'll just comment on that. So, right, there were versions of ordinances that did have, in there, setting a limit. I think when I've been doing all this research on short-term rentals, it really opened my eyes to why we're seeing such an influx of investors coming to Narragansett to buy, not existing property owners, but we're seeing a lot of people from California, New York, New Jersey, from all different parts of the United States, because they can do short-term rentals here. We don't have any regulations. So we are losing that housing stock because, investors will pay a lot of money because they're making a lot more money on the rent from these short-term rentals. So they will take that risk. And that's why we see a lot of LLCs. We see a lot of these investors, just groups of investors investing in properties. We see that a lot. That's why I was curious. I'm like, why are these California people buying a house? And it's because they can't. Because when I researched ordinances in California, they don't allow it. And so when you research ordinances in New Jersey or New York, they don't allow it. So everybody is migrating to Narragansett because they can, and they can buy up our properties, and we're losing the housing stock, we're losing community, and it's driving up the prices because investors are willing to pay a lot more. And then it's boxing out families that can live here year-round. And that is, I agree with Jesse, that is the overarching goal of this. And then when we combine the bulk zoning and the 3-student ordinance and the short-term rental, that was also basically combined to get families, year-round families to live here. And some people might think that that's a pipe dream, but I don't. And I think it can happen. And setting a limit may be an important factor in this. And it's like you want to protect property rights, but you also want to preserve our community, because there's so many communities out there that just, that turned into just, like Jesse said, they're like hotels, like short, it is a boutique hotel, these houses. And then there's streets that are bought up by investors. And then I've seen other ordinances where it doesn't allow, short-term rentals beyond every 300 more than, if there's limits. So it's very interesting to see what a lot of these municipalities have implemented to help preserve the character of their towns. Just look in Florida, what's happened. I think it's sad, and I don't want to see that happening to Narragansett. And it's not something that happened overnight. We keep on saying that. It's been something that's been happening and going on for years and years, but we have the opportunity to implement change. And I think that's what we need to do as a council.
Okay, do we have any other thoughts from the council, or any additional thoughts or comments from staff? Mike or Wayne or Kevin? No? Okay. Good. Okay, we go to the public. All right, we're going to go to the public. We want to hear some comments. We're going to try to, I don't know if we have the clock running, but we're going to try to ask everyone to keep your comments at 3 minutes. And please state your full name and address when you come to the mic. We'll go with Jim in the middle. Dan, is that microphone on? Okay. Jim, can you state your full name and address?
James Durkin, 375 Ocean Road. I always say 815 Point Judith Road because I spend my whole life at my office. you know, and I have. And actually, I've spent more time at my office in the last month because of all of these rules. We don't even know what the hell's going on half the time. We spend more time on the phone with our customers, our clients, people that come here spend money, the owners that live here and rent a house, family members. I don't even think this is a work session. Why am I getting sworn in? This is supposed to be a work
You didn't get,
session.
no, you didn't get sworn in. You just
Oh,
stated your name.
But it seems so like not worky, you know, like it's, you know what I mean? It's like, I remember the work sessions we had when I was on the town council and, you know, I'm not trying to make you, I like the ideas the four of you people have come up with and made it sound like you're reasonable. But, I mean, the work sessions that we had were, there was a circle of chairs, people talk back and forth. This is like a town council meeting that you're not sitting up there. And we're at open forum now. And I'm surprised that thing's not ticking up there. But anyway, I'm not gonna waste time, but, you know, and I don't wanna say, but I'm a third generation person doing the same thing that my grandfather started doing, like, I don't know, in the 40s. Never really left this town. My family's gonna stay here. This is what we do. We'll continue to do it. I mean, we registered our buildings. I was on the town council when we passed the registration ordinance. So we had everybody do the registration. We did the, you know, orange sticker thing. We created the orange sticker. You know, we did all of that. KEG ordinance, we did that. You know, affordable housing, we bought land on Clark Road to build affordable housing. We built houses around the town with Mike McLaughlin. I mean, we did all of that stuff in a simple way. And we didn't put these big net, you know, like laws on top of problems. And I think, you know, this bulk zoning thing has been a big mess. I know somewhat why it's been done, but it's targeting like this whole college student thing, tourist thing, when, you know, our town really doesn't have any businesses that really amount to much except for tourism, fishing, and probably real estate. I mean, probably real estate's one of them. There's a lot of realtors, right, Pat?
Yes, sir.
Too many, right? But whatever. So I came here thinking this was a done deal because I just always thought 3 votes was the only way you could have a work session, you know? And especially have a meeting like this a month before an election. So it's really like comforting to me to hear at least you 4 people have a different tone, you know what I mean? Like there's different ways. Now I heard Wayne get up, and if you do the calculation, I think Wayne said 1,700 houses have registered. 1,400, okay, so 1,400. So I know I registered all of mine that I could, and some of them just couldn't get registered because I had multiple houses on one lot or whatever it was. So there's probably another 20 more, something coming, and I'm sure there's another 1,000 not registered because they couldn't figure out how to do things. I had 80-year-old ladies calling me. They were trying to do it on their phone and stuff that own a house, and they just rent it, you know, to 3 students, and they stay in it for the summer, but, you know, they're all, so anyway. But Wayne said that, because on the registration form, there's like 6 different categories, and I truly think there is a serious problem with one of the categories. I think the town has taken care of the students over the years. I don't think the students are partying half as much as they used to. I think that the summer people have never really been a problem until Airbnb, and especially Airbnb, because the original platform was rent your house by owner or rentyourhouse.com or whatever it was. And so Wayne says that 60 people of the 1,400, so that's like what, 7% maybe, 6.5%. So 6.5% are the people that are really causing this like issue that you guys are worrying about. Because I hear what you're saying, and I hear what other people are saying, and I think it's wrong. I mean, I wouldn't want to live in a house, and then the house next door, you have no idea who's coming in, like, every other night. Like, sometimes it's 2 nights, or a bachelor party for one night, and a bachelorette party for the next night. I think that's very wrong.
Jim, I want to make sure we get a chance for everyone to speak.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's a work session, right?
Yeah, but, I mean, but everyone should be able to speak,
All
so.
right, well, I mean, can we?
Anything, well, if, yeah, one more, yeah,
I
hurry
mean,
up.
it's not like I tried to be first, so you couldn't say.
Let's
we were
go.
talking about it. But, so anyway, I think you should think about that. Instead of putting this net over everybody, the short-term rentals are really the problem, and the state has already registered everybody that uses the platform. So why can't we just wait and see what the state does with their registration and help, you know, in one way, instead of having this duplicative thing? Because you gotta pay, I don't know what it is, $50 to the state. It just came out today. I mean, you know, it just came out today, I think. So you get to register until January. So I don't know, I just feel like there's people that are in this town that vote and that have houses, that live here, and don't create a mess, and, you know, I guess that's all I can say. I'd like to say some more stuff, but, you know.
Well, we'll come back around.
All right.
All right, thank you. Yep, right up front.
Good evening, Steve DeSimone, 86 Sunset Boulevard. I'm a year-round resident, a father, my kids are in the school system. I coach t-ball, I coach flag football this year. We're just starting, it's very exciting, it's great. But, you know, it seems like your goal is to get more families here, right? I heard that, I've seen it online, and it seems like you want to bring property values down, which restricting our property rights is a great way to do it. That seems one of the stated goals, which I'm going to go ahead and disagree with, because I know you're not going to stop spending tax dollars. I got a great tax bill that said, your tax rate went down, and my taxes went up $1,200. So I work 2 jobs, I'm tired, I'd like to retire one day, and when my kids leave, like Patrick said, it'd be nice if I could short-term rental my house. But if we do a restriction like Jesse wants, I got to get on a list in 20 years. I'm a firm no on that. I know it doesn't matter much, but I am. And, you know, the 7 days, I'm happy to see 7 days rather than 30, which frankly was what I expected you were going to attempt. I'd prefer to see it at 3 because, like I said, I live here. But I was toying with the idea of renting my house for a weekend here and there on the summer, and maybe I'll go on vacation with my family. I think that'd be nice to leave me that option, as I'm not doing this for a property, you know, business, and I think it's wrong for you to take my property rights away because you're not happy with the way a few people are running their properties. And my last thing, I know I'm going long, why are we making Wayne do this? Like, don't we have legal counsel? He's got a lot on his plate. I know there's a lot of pending building permits. You do a great job, by the way, Wayne. But I feel like this is like more stuff for him, and we already have a very confusing permitting process that takes forever. So find another way maybe to do that. And, sorry, I forgot one more thing. I do have a rental in front of me. They've already been called on this year. There were 3 kids throwing a ball in the backyard with music playing. Quietly, I might add. I live 200 feet behind them. I'm their closest neighbor. I couldn't hear it with my doors shut. When I was out in the parking lot, I said hi, could barely hear the music. They've already had the police called. So I don't think it's much a problem about who's going to, you know, people are going to call. There are people who get offended by everything. They're going to call, the police will have to go there, or Wayne will have to go there. You're going to call Patrick or Jim in the middle of the night and say, somebody called. Last year, they were called on because they were parked in the street. They had friends over parked in the road. A woman had to drive to her house. I watched her call because I was pulling out of my parking lot. Had been with my kids at their house 20 minutes before the cops were called. It was not out of control. It was not over the top. It was one woman was slightly inconvenienced on her ride home to her house 1,000 feet away, where she couldn't possibly have heard this. So putting this in the hands of the neighbors to police each other, I think is also a mistake. And that's all I'm going to say because it's baby bedtime and I got to get home. Thank you, guys. And can we, more work sessions? I like that. Maybe not a vote in the next month. Seems rushed. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, I'll go in the far back. Yep, you, George. Yep. You can state your full name and address.
Yep. George Nonis, 60 Exeter Boulevard. Tonight I expect, good evening. Tonight I expected the discussion on short-term rentals to be 7 days, 4 days, 2 days. I was shocked, to be honest, with this overreaching proposal, the most anti-business ordinance this town's ever seen. And you know what? Tonight, not one of you said anything, said the word business, small business, because that's what this is about. And you know, there are groups in here, you're going down a slippery slope. There are groups in here that are looking to make Narragansett elite. So it's only for a few. And I'll tell you, we ran into that last year when there was a woman in a group wanted buses from Providence to be reduced. People on those buses wanted a separate beach entrance and checked for weapons. Is that what you want Narragansett to be? A member complained because he had to wait in a long line at a restaurant in the summer. Guess what? There's people out there that are making money on that are trying to survive on that. But we don't hear anything about small business. Nope, we don't. We hear about more regulation. You're turning your back on the hardworking men and women, business owners that need tourism. They struggle. You know they struggle. You see the signs. They can't find workers. They shorten their hours. The service isn't what it used to be. But what do? We're trying to eliminate any extra money they get. Weekends, weekend weddings, overflows maybe from events in Newport. They depend on that money. But none of you will look those people in the eye and say, maybe this isn't right for you, the struggling people. I speak for small business today who aren't here tonight. Why? Because maybe they're working. Most of them would probably be working, or they're home wondering, what are they going to do if an employee doesn't show up tomorrow? How are they going to open up the doors? And what do you do with this proposal? You tell them, we don't care about you. You'd rather restrict property owners who supply tourists to these businesses with overbearing ordinances. There's so much wrong with this government overreach. We've talked about a few elements tonight, but I'll go over them again. No renting under 7 days, so goodbye any weekend business to those companies. No on-street parking anytime and no more vehicles and bedrooms. I guess relatives, as Sue said, I guess relatives and guests, the renters, they're not welcomed here either. No private parties or private events or parties allowed. So much for birthdays and anniversaries. And you know what? I'll ask you, are you going to apply that same reasoning to any resident? Or is it just for rentals? Why can anyone else have a party, anniversary, have cars in the street, but not rentals? That doesn't seem right to me. A separate lease for each tenant. Why? The building department's going to store thousands of leases? What's the point of this? The owner must keep the lease for 1 year. Why again? What is that? What are you going to do with that? I mean, some of these pieces are like, I don't know who thought them up. The maximum number of short-term rental registration be established by the town, which Jesse talked about, based on what? And I think Jesse said they don't know yet, and I understand that. Separate $75 per bedroom fee, because we don't want more people to spend their money on these businesses. And in your research, you talked about doing the research, and I'm kind of a research guy, and I'm a data guy. So tell me in your research, did you talk to landlords? Did you talk to property managers? Did you talk to small businesses in town? The ones that are going to be, that A, they're the most experienced, because they deal with it every day, and B, they're the ones most affected. But I don't think I heard that tonight. I don't think you said you had a work session and you talked to those people. How can you have a work session and not talk to the people that are most affected? Doesn't seem right to me. And you know, you talk about data. Well, have you also talked to the police department? How many nuisance reports do they get in the summer? Anybody know? Probably not. I know because I've asked that question. You can go ask the police chief about that. So we're, again, looking for a problem without a solution. We have a solution, but we don't have a problem. You know, how many of those that Jim talked about, how many short-term rentals do we really have? And if we don't have these issues, you all talk about complaints. The police is the department that categorizes those complaints. So why don't we look at data? We never look at data. When we bring up data, it's kind of like, well, you know, we hear this or we hear that. And Ewa says, all these people from California are coming in. How many? How many rentals do you have from California? Or New Jersey and New York? Do you have the numbers? No, there's silence. So you can throw out a lot of terms and everything else, but you don't have the numbers. Come to a work session with numbers. I asked Mike the other day, I sent an email saying, when you come to the session, would you have these numbers in place? Has anyone done a study, the town done a study on the economic impact of students and tourists on the economy of Narragansett? I've looked for it, I haven't found it. How can you run a town, a coastal town, that's inhabited by students as well, and you don't know the economic effect, yet you're making changes, you're putting in ordinances without knowing that? I don't understand how you can do it. I guess because I come from the business world, and we don't make decisions unless we have the data. I don't hear any data tonight, and I generally don't hear data. Anyways, I trust the council will move this to a point where they have more discussion, and it's kind of a backward process for me. I would think that you would have a workshop, get all the ideas, then you go and put something on a piece of paper, which then you're reacting to, not a piece of paper that someone put together, and then you have a workshop to discuss it. Just seems backward to me. Anyways, I think if we move forward with this, you may as well put those signs on Route 95, those electronic signs say, "Tourists not welcome in Narragansett." Thank you.
All right, thanks, George. All right. I do want to, and George, you're welcome to come back up if you want, but I do want to address a couple things that you said. You know, first of all, we live in Narragansett, like a few other people here. We don't need to have a workshop to talk to business owners, because we talk to business owners, because we know business owners. We go to their restaurants, we go to their shops. And one of the things I hear from business owners, especially restaurant owners, is that the biggest problem they have isn't a lack of tourists, it's a lack of staff, because nobody can live in Narragansett and rent in Narragansett and work at their restaurant, because it's too expensive, because everyone's short-term renting their apartments and their houses. So that's basically, for me, a fact. It's a fact of their life. It's a fact of their business. And when you come up here and say that these rentals are bringing so much business to Narragansett, as if that's the motive of short-term rental owners, is to help the businesses in Narragansett, not to make money.
But is that the effect of it? Is it the effect that it is bringing
It's
money
the
to this?
effect to a certain point. And you know when businesses were doing better was in the 90s, in the 80s, before the short-term rental proliferation, when people lived here year-round, and you can have a restaurant that it stayed open year-round, it didn't have to close in the winter. So you do have a very heavy summer and issues staying open year-round. So the idea that this town can't function without landlords owning short-term rentals, that's a perspective that you have. That's one that we disagree
I didn't say that
with.
they couldn't function. What I said was that they're bringing money to struggling businesses. Is that a true statement or not?
But why are they struggling?
For a number of reasons. Because they can't find the staff. Has this group
Why can't they find staff?
Has this group put any plans in place? Had an employee fair or anything to try to help the businesses?
You said that, how dare we be upset when tourists come in and help the servers make more money, right? It's those servers that can never live in this town again because of the cost of housing. And part of the main reason why the housing cost has gone up is Airbnbs. Is that not true?
Yes.
Okay.
Airbnbs plus everything else. I mean,
Okay.
you rent in the winter, you rent in the summer. No one's denying the fact that it's an attractive investment opportunity.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks.
Can I just make one other point?
Yep.
This is the work session. You said that we hadn't had any work sessions. This is the work session. and we could have more of them as
It
necessary,
is, I
as you
know
mentioned.
it's a work
So-
session, but normally a work session doesn't come with something that people have already put together.
Well, I've worked in
To
business.
me, that's-
I worked in business too, and what we had was a draft to discuss something when we were trying to determine what the best thing to do is. So to me, this is a draft.
My point about the business was if you're doing, and I know you talk about anecdotal, you've talked to businesses and everything else. That's different than having a group, which Ewa said, she had a group of people, that you should include those people in that group so you get the feedback from the property managers, from landlords.
Anyone
from-
could come tonight and speak,
The
right?
group you talked about that Ewa put together to put together this document, what I'm saying is that research should also have included those other people that are close to this topic. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Right up front, yep. Please state your full name and address.
It's Dr. Arman Abrahampour, 72 Kingstown Road.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your comments. I'm not going to repeat those because they're all valid, and I'm glad I came because at least I know two of you that I won't be voting for. This really, to me, looks like it's a solution looking for a problem. I have talked to some of my cohorts, and I won't talk about them, but I can tell you my own experience. I live in a two-family house, and it's a historic house. As you know, these homes are very, very expensive to keep. To just dimension this for you, a couple of months ago, my contractor, Billy Gaffney, gave me a bid of $28,000 to fix the patio. Well, then he went to Mr. DeLuca to get the permit, and following that permit, guess what the cost was? Just guess. $78,000. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca, by the way. It's a beautiful patio. The reason I have that large house is my wife and I have 4 kids. When they come to visit, like anybody else, we like to be under one roof. We can't live in a 2-bedroom house because then where is a family gonna stay? Without rentals, there is no way those fixing in a historic house is gonna be done. It pretty much leaves me with one option. Let the place deteriorate. After 10 years, yes, it's historic, but I know I can demolish it. Instead, I can build 2 houses. So what I'm trying to tell you is be careful what you wish for, because your choices has consequences. It's one of the most beautiful houses down in the pier. It's one block from here. Go look at it. It's expensive to keep. You all think, oh, he makes so much money. No. Almost every dollar I make goes in the house to keep it up. You want it to be demolished? Be my guest. Because, Mr. Zwicky, I guarantee you that house is not going to be rented as low-cost house unless you're willing to subsidize it by 80%. Do you have that money? I didn't think so. I leave you at that.
All right, Mr. Hames in the back. Wynn, please state your full name and address.
Winters B. Hames III, 30 Wood Avenue, Narragansett, Rhode Island. First of all, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we are not San Francisco, we are not Chicago, we are not Washington, D.C. And I will get back to all of them in a minute. The question was asked, has anybody any idea the number of complaints from the short-term rentals? Anybody? Anybody, or the summer? Okay, let's get back to the cities. All of those ordinances are put in place or promoted by the hotel industry, not any of the residents, because there's so many hotels that are empty, they want to get rid of all the B&Bs and everything else so that people come to the hotels. We do not have that problem. We don't have enough hotels here just to take care of the people that want to come to this town. Going back to the businesses, I'll give you an example. I have friends that come from Long Island every year for a weekend, and they charter a boat. They come in on Friday, they say Friday night, Saturday night, they go out fishing on Saturday, come Saturday night, and they go back, okay? That's a 2-night rental. They do this 3 times a year. They're not going to rent for 3 nights. They're not going to rent for 4 nights. So what are you taking away? You're taking away 3 charter rentals. You're taking away all the money they spend on dinners, bait, and everything else they spend in the town. And that's just one instance. Parties. I have a party. I have a fairly large party, okay? And the thing about it is, every single one of you have been to my party. Every single one of you. It's Memorial Day weekend. I have people come from Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York. They come in. They rent Saturday, Sunday. They go home on Monday. They have already booked for next year, okay? Now, I tell them, you can no longer come. I can't even have a party. Neighbor of mine just had a wedding. Jimmy Bennett had a big tent in his yard. Okay, he's not supposed to have his wedding for his daughter there? This is so much of an overreach. It's so business negative, it's unbelievable. Okay, you're not protecting anybody. And as far as the housing industry in this town, some of you exasperated that to no end. Okay, you went from 4 to 3. Just to give a quick, and this goes back to housing, affordable housing. If you have 2,000 kids that want to live here, 4 bedrooms, you need 500 houses. If you have 2,000 kids, you need 633 houses. That's why we have almost 100 more registration rentals, a lot of them 3 bedrooms, because they can make the money on them now. So what you've done is the exact opposite of what you wanted to do. You've driven the prices of the 3-bedroom houses out of sight. Out of sight. Okay, people can come in now, buy a 3-bedroom house and make money on it.
Except you don't have the data of those houses being purchased and made into 3 bedrooms. You don't have that over the last year. And we don't have to come up with those numbers in Narragansett because there's a town right next door where the college actually is. You know, people can live there too. They don't have
People
to.
can live there. Well, why
Right.
do you live in this town? Why do I live in this town? I live in this town because we've got 5 beaches. We have nightlife. We have restaurants. College kids want to do the same thing. You can't say, hey, all you guys go live in Exeter. You can't say that. They want to come here. The demand is coming
They want to come in
here.
because it's been the cheapest because people have had 8-bedroom houses with
I'm not
college
saying
kids.
8-bedroom. The demand is coming here. It's a supply and demand issue. The demand is always going to be here. Supply always catches up to demand. So if your demand is 2,000 students, you need 633 houses.
Okay.
Okay? It's all, I've advocated, you want URI to come down here. Somebody else mentioned numbers. And I'm a big believer in numbers. I'd be more than happy to go to the economics department or URI, come down here, give a presentation about how this works. Because you want to go against the laws of supply and demand. It does not work.
All right. All right. All right. Thank you.
I got more.
Okay. Ron. Please state your full name and address.
Ron Catanzaro, Atlantic Ave. First, I want to tell Mike and the Historical Committee that while it was a big surprise for me when I first bought my house that I was in a historic district, and yes, it did cost me a little extra, it came out beautiful. I'm really happy about it. I'm the 4th owner of a house that's 122 years old, and I think Mike and his group really liked the way it came out as well because they put a picture of it in the brochure for the Historical Committee. So I think, you know, all of that stuff is good. That's impact. That's what we're trying to do. The other impact that I think I'd like to tell people about is 2 years ago, our elementary school had 4 teachers in each grade, okay? Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th all had 4 sections per grade. Today, 2 years later, all but 1 has 3 sections, okay? So our student population at the elementary school level is shrinking. And if we were to stay where we are today, when will we be combining with South Kingstown, North Kingstown, and combining school districts, right? Where does it end? This is the impact that we're talking about. The rules and regulations that we're talking about today are whether or not we have a town. If we have no schools, we have no kids in the schools, why do we need anything? A new library, go down the list, playgrounds, everything we talk about. There's no kids in the town, why do we need it?
Please state your full name and address.
Carleen Town, 240 Wood Hill Road. I emailed you all about my concerns and my neighbors' concerns about short-term rentals, and I'd just like to reiterate a few points. Unlike some landlords who think it's a noise and drunkenness problem, my neighbors and I have other concerns about short-term rentals. Just one weekend in September, the house across the street was rented for a wedding reception. Harbor Island is a residential community, but the homeowners across the street have turned their house into a commercial operation. While I, a single homeowner doing only 3 to 4 batches of laundry a week and unable to water the gardens I have tended for years, the short-term rental across the street used hundreds of gallons of water, flushing toilets, washing dishes, and taking showers. While the majority of the guests left after the reception, 6 or more cars with multiple occupants stayed overnight. This is only one example. One weekend, there were 16 cars parked all over our lawns for another party hosted by a short-term renters. It was even rented to be a training facility for some company to get new representatives to sell its products during at-home parties. The renters are instructed to put trash out in the streets before they leave. Narragansett Rubbish picks up Harbor Island trash on Tuesday. That's not too much of an issue when the renters leave on Monday night, unless they don't put covers on the barrels. It becomes an issue when the trash is put out on a Sunday or earlier, and raccoons, dogs, and coyotes get into it, and it ends up all over the neighbors' lawns. I know we have to have a balance between people who rent their houses and residents, but it's getting out of control. I mean, they're coming in for 2 nights and disturbing neighborhoods. And they're using water and resources, and they're not, a lot of them aren't going out and doing restaurants and things like that. They had a caterer in for that wedding. So I just think there has to be some regulations that you can't have 16 cars overnight in a residential neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go until 8 tonight, so we have 27 minutes. Are there any other comments from the council after hearing some commentary? You want to just keep going with public comment? Good, okay. All right, great. Right up front.
Neil Patrick, 17 Elm Ave. After listening tonight, I came in tonight, I was pretty upset about the proposed ordinance, and thankfully, I'm glad we had a discussion where people did come in with more of an open opinion rather than coming in with a preconceived notion. But I think that at the heart of it, the proposed ordinance doesn't address the issues that people have brought up. Patrick, you mentioned, the current concern is 1 to 2 nights, very, very big rentals. This doesn't address that specifically. Jesse, you mentioned we just need more, we need a limit to the number of rentals. This doesn't address it. Deb, sorry, I didn't catch exactly what you were looking for, but Eva, I know you were talking about out-of-town owners. This doesn't address it. At the end of the day, it hurts people who are here, live here, and own more than it does anybody else. And part of my concern is, yes, we say, well, we're just going to start here with these limitations. Where does it end? First, it's a handful of nights, then it's 7. Now we're hearing it should be 30. What comes next? All rentals? Does it come, do we say we're going to put the same kind of limitations on owners, people that live here? I know somebody mentioned that as well. And then finally, there was a quick, almost like a throwaway comment about the fee schedule and the ordinance charges, that nobody would complain. I think we all know, and we have people and neighbors who do complain. We all have that one neighbor who will complain about anything. And the way that this fee structure is set up, 3 complaints, not 3 actual violations. 3 complaints, shut down. So I think you need to look really closely at what the expectations are for the short-term rentals. And if that's what you want to do, just come out and say it. You just want to shut down short-term rentals, and all it takes is a handful of complaints to shut them down. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a good point. I do want to also just raise the point that, just again, that what we're looking at tonight is something to work off of, something to reference, and it was put together by 2 council members, not the group. So we've all shared our thoughts. So when you come up, it's fine to comment on the draft, but we're also looking for input on what we can do and other ideas that might be interesting, rather than just commenting on that draft, because that was the work of a group, not the full council. That's all. Okay, right up front.
Good evening. I'm Rupert Friday. I live at 113 Montauk Road. And when we moved here about 23 years ago, when we were looking for places to buy our family, the realtor steered us away from the communities that were heavily rental areas. There were no rentals on our street. Our street of 13 houses, there are now 2 rentals. And I have sort of a tale of 2 stories. One of the rentals, absentee, lives in Florida, no accountability at all. So I think this ordinance that you have a draft of does a good step in providing some accountability for landlords who are a problem. The other landlord lives in town this summer, knows the neighbors. When we have a problem, we can call him up. He has another rental property in town. When you adopted the 3-student ordinance, he actually put on a lock on the 4th door in that house because he knows the community, he cares about the community. So I think accountability for short-term rentals is really important. The rental where the absentee landlord this summer has rented probably 4 different weeks, and the people that rented it complained to me about how bad a shape it was in and how it was not cleaned, even though they paid a cleaning fee. So I think there needs to be accountability, and I think your draft is a good step, at least at looking at those things. I guess an alternative would be to look at zoning, say you can have Airbnbs, student rentals in these areas. When we bought in this community, it was a single-family residential community. We didn't expect that somebody could buy a house across the street and turn it into a business. No review, no process, nothing. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Right up front. Yep. Please state your full name and address.
My name is Nick Capezza. I live in the city of Cranston and own a house in Narragansett that I use sometime and rent sometime. I'm not here to argue about this proposed ordinance. I just would like to bring up a few points that I think need clarification. I'm willing to pay whatever rental fees. I'm willing to abide by the laws. I've abided by the laws with my rentals in the past. I at all times try to avoid shorter-term rentals. The few questions that I have, I don't want answers. I just want to bring this up, so I hope that in the next time around, something can be done. There's some definitions that need clearer definitions. Unrelated persons, I think as someone said, is that the third cousin to a cousin? Is it the brother? Is it the father? Is it, right now, the way the definition stands, you might as well not even bring that up. Specifically, parking by trade, I'm an engineer, just retired from the city of Cranston. Thank you, happily retired. Parking, I understand that the ordinance is proposing 1 space per bedroom. The parking is not defined. Is it paved? Is it gravel? Is it block? Is it brick? Is it grass? If you don't define that, they'll park on the grass. I don't allow parking on the grass. I have 2 large driveways at my rental property. That has to be clarified, I think, and the size, don't know where that came from. 10 by 20 is above the standard parking size of 9 by 18. So if you're going to define a parking space by a size and it's on somebody's lawn, it makes no sense even defining that size. So I think we have to clarify that. the 2 people per bedroom. I'm not a building official, but I spoke with Cranston's local building official, and I'm sure Narragansett goes by the state building code. There's a definition for a bedroom. It's not 200 square feet, it's 70 square feet. There's other parts of the definition. There's nothing in the state building code that says it's allowed only 2 people. In my rental property that I take great pride in, I have what I call a bonus room as one of the bedrooms. It's 525 square feet. It has bunk beds. Families like to rent my house. I get the same families back every year. I do not advertise. I do not advertise in the internet, Airbnb. It's word of mouth, and I get the same people back every year. It's families only. They put their children in the bonus room. It'd be unreasonable to think that I have 3 sets of bunk beds, that the adults will have their own room, and the nephews and nieces and sons and daughters will not be allowed to put more than 2 people in a 500 square foot bedroom. My house was built 15 years ago by me. It met all the codes at the time. It's up to date. It's meticulously maintained. I think that section also has to be addressed about telling me that I can only have 2 people in that room. The definition of the rental, does this mean that a rental is only if you collect money for rent? Can I let my friends use my house for a weekend, which I've done in the past? I've let family, I've let close friends rent, not rent, use my house. Again, I will not rent for less than a week, but friends of mine want to use my house, I let them use it for 3 days. Is that addressed in the definition of a rental? Can I still let a family member use my house for a weekend? Again, I don't expect the answers. I think there's things that need to be addressed for the next draft. Again, I'm not against this ordinance. I think it has to be enforceable, and these are some of the questions that are not enforceable. I think the amount of insurance of $1 million is arbitrary, and I think it's awfully high. Where that number came from, I'm not sure, but I hope that someone at least looks at that. The definition, you have response time. I'm supposed to come down. I live in Cranston. I think that 30-mile number is arbitrary. When I checked today, I Googled the directions to come down here, though I've been here 1,000 times. If I take one route, it's 28 miles. If I take another route, it's 31 miles. So I think that number should be changed or eliminated. The response time of 60 minutes. I left my house at 5 o'clock. I did not get here in 60 minutes because of traffic. I don't know what I'm supposed to do when I'm supposed to respond anyways. I think if there's criminal activity on my house, I think the police would take care of it. Someone else brought up the complaints. I think complaints need to be changed to actually offenses. We've had neighbors complain because they would like to complain, but if they complain and there's no violation there, I don't think I should be fined for just a complaint. Again, I'm not against this ordinance. I tried to do this all on my own with the people I screened for my house. And just one other thing, I spent some time in here in the summer, and usually in the month of June, and I've had problems with other rental properties that are occupied at the same time that I'm occupying my house, and it's by the owners of those rentals. So it's not only the people that are renting the house, it's sometimes the owners who come down here for a week too. So this doesn't really solve that problem. Other than that, I hope you take some of my comments to heart and make some changes. Again, I'm not against this ordinance, and hopefully next time around we can have some improvement. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for
All
your
right.
help.
In the back, in the hat, yep. All right, please state your full name and address.
Joe Volpe, 19 Harbor Island Road. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. And I think it's fitting that I'm following that woman shortly after her that lives on Harbor Island, because I do as well. I'm a 30-year resident, 29-year town employee, member of the fire department, owner of a rental property, and I'm raising my daughter in the school system. I think it's safe to say that I have a vested interest and unique perspective into seeing this town thrive, not just in the summer, but year-round. First of all, I'm all for guidelines, but guidelines don't mean anything unless they're enforced. One of the things I was going to recommend tonight was a rental compliance officer. It's not Wayne. I appreciate his confidence in handling all this, but they also mentioned calling dispatch for some problems, and again, as a veteran of this department, the last thing our dispatchers need are phone calls of this nature. I think a rental compliance officer, a couple days a week, I don't know, I know that there's money involved, but a liaison for residents to report these issues, whether it's trash or parking, what have you. I also think it would be a good benefit to the landlords because it makes everybody accountable. I know I get frustrated when I hear stories of people that aren't doing the right thing, and I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of not only the property I have, but how I handle people, how I handle the tenants as well as my neighbors. I feel I have a responsibility going along with my rental property. And when I hear Councilman Murray say he doesn't want to see 8 cars in a 2-bedroom house, I'm with you. I don't either. But I feel a rental compliance officer checks a lot of boxes. Also, for example, that person could qualify some of these complaints. September 5th, for example, when the students moved in, people took to social media and was taking pictures of the cars on September 5th. Well, that's drop-off day. There were families, brothers, sisters, girlfriends, moving them in. And Wayne had mentioned he doesn't think some people are going to complain about certain things. Well, there's some squeaky wheels that need some grease in this town, and I can tell you right now they are going to complain. So we need to figure out what's real and what's not real. Second point of the ordinance I'd like to discuss is the time frame of 1 week. Although a week works in the summer, I would argue that it doesn't work in the off-season when travel trends change dramatically. People are looking to go to a wedding at the Towers, the Calamari Festival, maybe their kid's graduating URI, and they want a nice place to stay. In addition to excluding people that can't afford a week here, now on the heels of COVID, you're substantially affecting the businesses that are already struggling. Truth is, we need both long and short-term rentals. The other question I have is, where are the people going to stay? Mr. Durkin is here, and I know he's the owner of the Break. I think it's a great location. I would stay there, but it's limited to its size. One of our other hotels, which isn't exactly updated, houses academic rentals on the top floor. Better stated, where would you and your family stay when you're coming to Narragansett? Think about that. All these articles, the Boston Globe, Travel.com, come to Narragansett. It's the #1 beach town, #3 beach town. But if you come, you have to stay for a week. And if you can't afford a week, you can't come. And we're limited in the places where you can stay. I'm sure everybody up there has rented a house before. I'm sure. That's because you want to be under the same roof with your family. And people, the word's out, people are coming to Narragansett. So why don't we come up with an ordinance that works for the town of Narragansett? 7 days in the summer, okay, there needs to be balance. But 3 or 4 days and the rest of the season, the shoulder season, is what people want. And I think we can maximize the supply and demand that way. And by having the compliance officer, we're not managing business, we're managing people. And what we need to do is manage people. Last thing I'd like to say is a bit about composure. I'm practicing it right now. Running into a burning building sometimes is easier than getting up here and talk, I gotta be honest with you. But I think we need to stay composed. I applaud Councilwoman Cicilline Bonanno. One of the meetings you mentioned, we have to slow down and get things right. And I think everyone up there wants to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing for Narragansett. I believe that. But one of our councilors feels the need to push this before the next election. And frankly, I find that reckless and frankly a little bit desperate. Being a leader, the last thing you want to do is come across as desperate, and pushing this through with everybody around here and everything that's going on with this seems inappropriate. I thank you for your time. I think it's time to do, not just do something, but do the right thing for Narragansett. Thank you.
All right. In the glasses.
Thank you.
Please state your full name and address.
Greg Madsen, 3 Major Fleet Runway. Having read through these ordinances, I was attempting to figure out what the purpose of the ordinance was. And it appears that it has a lot more to do with eliminating disorderly conduct. And in many people's opinion, the police are doing a great job with that, and they don't need any more tools in their bag. The question should be asked of the police department if they require more tools. And I think the answer would be no, but I think we have to ask that question. And I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but my question is, how was this committee formed? How did Deb and Ewa and Mike and Wayne end up on this committee?
I'll answer it. Right, so we had an agenda item at the council level, which was a directive to the town manager to work on a short-term rental ordinance. We wanted to have council input, but we can only have 2 council members, otherwise it's a quorum. So we emailed, sent an email and said who wants to be on that, in this working group. It ended up being Deb and Eva, and then it makes sense to have our community development.
How did it end up being?
It was a volunteer thing.
Okay.
I'm not running, so I don't want to be on
Raise
it.
your hand, got it. Okay, I'm just curious how.
Yeah, it was whoever, actually the first 2 that replied got it.
So I want to talk about the impact on the local businesses. Narragansett is a vacation destination, and we should welcome vacationers as major contributors to the Narragansett economy, not restrict them. Local businesses like Monahan's, Iggy's, Int Carry's, Brickley's, and a lot of other local establishments open on Memorial Day weekend. If people can't come here to stay for Memorial Day weekend, then what are all those businesses going to do? People come to Narragansett for those 3 days. Many families with school-aged children can't come to vacation until July 1st because their kids are in school. So they come for a 3-day weekend. They'll come Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if we eliminate 3-day vacations, we're eliminating 5 weekends from Memorial Day until July 1st, and then from August until Labor Day weekend, there's another 3 weekends. Those are 8 weekends. If you take 8 weekends away from all of our local businesses, it's going to end up what it looks like today. I drove around Narragansett today. It's desolate. There's nobody here. The businesses are all closed. There's nothing going on. We can't have that in June and also in August because the businesses that are open, they're not going to be able to open just for a month and a half to 2 months. I don't think anywhere we actually took the time to understand the impact on local businesses. I understand some of these things are politically motivated, but we're trying to fix a problem that I don't think exists. I don't think there's a problem with 3-day renters. If there is, I'd like to get data from the police chief or from somewhere that says there's a problem. I don't know that there is a problem with short-term rentals, and it does affect local businesses And I think as the town council, you should all take that into consideration.
All right, thank you. All the way in the back. Please state your full name and address.
Andy Frost, 415 Ocean Road. I am an owner of a home, lived here for 22 years, and also the owner of 3 rentals, which are on our property, and we rent them long-term, yearly leases. There's many reasons why we chose to do that, but it means that I do have some insight into some of the rentals, and the responsibility of being someone who owns rentals. I live very close to Jim Durkin, and he's fabric of the town. His rentals are fabric of the town. He monitors what's going on, as do many of the other folks who are here. But there are some people that don't, and that's why we're here. You know, cars came into being 100 or so years ago. Things were fine until you got the people on the roads who didn't want to go along with the way people were going. We had to put rules in place. I think you're on the right track. I don't have a problem with you putting a document down that we have to talk about, as long as we don't close the doors and say that we don't want to talk about it. But I will tell you, there is a problem with short-term rentals that are 3 days or less. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's 7 days or if it's 30 days or what it is. But I live next door to one of them. We have had our lives threatened when we've been over at 2 a.m. to ask them please to keep the noise down. We've had beer bottles thrown at us in our yard. We've had cars parked across our driveway after we've asked people to please be quiet. They've parked across the driveway. Why do we go in and ask them to keep quiet? Because I can't call the police all the time. That's not what the police should be doing. I don't believe that that's the best use of our police force. There are a lot of other things that need to be seen to. So sometimes we've asked. It has been an ugly experience. The stress on us when it's Tuesday night and it's 2 a.m. and there's people next door with a huge fire that looks like it's about to set the house on alight, and they're loud and just not being part of the community. That's one issue. The other thing that I think we do have to address while we're talking about the number of rentals in the town, I have a 30-year-old daughter who just bought a house in Wakefield. Why did she buy in Wakefield? She wanted to be in Narragansett badly. She grew up here. She bought in Wakefield because they couldn't afford or find a house in Narragansett. There are no young people in her age group who have been able to buy a house in Narragansett. One of them is a young man whose father has worked in this town for many, many years and worked probably every one of the cocktail parties that you guys have been to. He's a lawyer. His wife is a PA. They want to be part of Narragansett. They want their children to go to the schools they went to. There are no houses. And when they have got involved in trying to buy a house, somebody's outbid them. And lo and behold, a few months later, there it is on Airbnb. There is a problem. And I don't want to affect the business of the responsible people who rent in Narragansett. It is part of our town. We're a seaside town. We have a population that expands and contracts. But we do need a solid base of winter people too, because the town won't survive if you don't have that. And Airbnb doesn't support that. The rentals for students do. So somehow we have to find a compromise that works. My suggestion to you guys is that to go to the next step, there should be some kind of working group, and I know nothing about what the council and or town rules are around this, but there should be a step that involves a group of people representing all of these different sides. I think that the base document is a great starting point. I know that there are a lot of problems with it, as have been so eloquently pointed out here by a lot of people who really work with and understand these things, but you have to start somewhere. And there are a lot of communities that have put laws into place because there's a problem. They don't put laws into place just because they're trying to be difficult with the people. I love this town. I want my children to be able to live in this town if they want to live in this town, and for their friends to be able to live here and raise their children here. But right now, this town isn't friendly for that because it's being overrun by rentals. There's a balance. We have to find what that balance is. We have to support our local businesses. We have to support our local businesses Brickley's closes down in the winter. It wouldn't close down if we had a whole bunch of kids and young families living here. They would have a much longer season. And that is the same for all of our restaurants too. And if it's true or not, yes, I know some people will say people are just not working, and there seems to be an element of that. There are a lot of reasons people put out there about why that's happened, but people who live in a town support the restaurants. They support the local businesses. We go out of our way to do that during the winter to try and keep them going. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's going to be it for comments. We're at 8 o'clock. Sorry we can't get to everyone tonight. There'll probably there may be a future workshop with the next council. Any last thoughts from this council? Anyone?
No, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate everybody's input, and obviously there's more work to be done, so thank you for everybody's feedback tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Eva, anything?
No, thank you for everyone for coming out. Again, thank you to the staff for helping draft this ordinance. It was a lot of work, and there's definitely a lot of input that we'll consider.